So welcome, everyone. I did excuse Carrie because we have a small group, and this is for the recording, that we will be talking about syntax and fluency today, and I'll make sure that everybody has the resources. I do have one thing that I put in the chat box that I want to share out, and that is the Structured Literacy Course Learning Guide for the Glean course. If you're not familiar with the Glean courses, I'll show you where you can access them. But I think it's a great resource. And the reason why I actually asked the person who organized it if I could share out the learning guide, because I think it would be a great intro for people to see what you would get out of their asynchronous course if you were to sign up. So let me take you to that. No, I don't want to go away from that. I'm still reviewing that free preschool curriculum. If anybody teaches preschool and wants to review it too and take a look at it. I know the woman who through this organization, Center for Reading Science at Mount St. Joseph University, and definitely, so that's a piece to review. But on the OSPI dyslexia webpage, and you can see I just put in OSPI dyslexia, and usually it comes right up, at least it does for me. So down here under Washington State Dyslexia Structured Literacy MTSS Bundle, these classes are going to be free for another year for everyone in our state. So feel free to please share and share alike. You'll notice it's enroll free. And the one that I put the note-taking guide for you in is their structured literacy course, which is 6 hours. It's a little bit less than half of what you've been getting from me live. But it's a different foci because it's an asynchronous course. And it's, again, just another way to continue your learning if you wanted these opportunities for free. This one's 6, this one's 2, this one's 3, this one is 2, and this one I think it says 5. And frankly, I would highly encourage anyone, Jill, I know you're school psych, right, Jill? It's SLP. One of those two.
SLP.
SLP. That even though it says for school psychologists, anybody who wants to go in deeper than the 2-hour course, I recommend. It's not just for school psychologists. So that was something I wanted to share with everyone as we get started. So as I'm bringing up all the other pieces in the background, I'm going to do our typical, not our background knowledge, but our just quick question to see if we have anyone new with us today. And while you're doing that, I will go ahead and move toward our land acknowledgement. And I have a couple of resources that I will put in the chat box for you. I always mean to get new ones, and sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't, but you feel free, you can add in resources as well. All right, looks like we have 100% people saying 5 out of 5 answer, 5 out of 8 answer. Oh, 62%. So close. Let's see, some people might have had to step away. Thank you for those of you who have been changing your names to indicate 75% close enough. If anybody comes in new who has not been with us before, feel free to put something in the chat box, but I don't think we have anyone new. So we'll just continue moving forward. We're recognizing our land acknowledgement and our racial injustice acknowledgement. Oh, I just saw another article this morning. I can't remember which state it was. A woman was shot. Oh, Florida. They're challenging their stand their ground rules because a mother was frustrated that a woman had thrown a pair of skates tore out of her into her yard, and her kids got hit with a pair of skates, I guess. And she went to approach the woman's house, and the woman shot through the door rather than opening the door. So let's hope that. Yeah, thank you, Jill. That was my reaction as well. It's like, the stand the ground laws are going a little too far for my taste, but we have a lot of work to do, don't we? But we have to have hope that things are going to get better, and we can work on making them better. So that's just that racial injustice piece. And I did put that. No, I didn't. I grabbed it, but I didn't. So I have a link from Black History Month, celebrating Black History Month, Women's History and Education. A couple of pieces for you for resources for learning more. And I always invite you to put some as well. I look forward to always learning more from others as well. I'm just going to zip through these Zoom tips because you all know, like I said, I should call them Zoom reminders or requests at this point. So I'll go through all those. Everyone here has been with me so far. And if I'm wrong, if anybody's come in since I put those in, feel free to add in, say, hey, I'm new, and I will go a little bit more slowly with everything. So there's the attendance link for anybody who is newly with us. Oh boy, thank you. Thank you, Nina. You take care of yourself. Okay. Guideposts we all know about, as well as our teaching and learning beliefs. So let's jump into the heart of it. Here's was our goals, and here's where we've been and where we are. So I'm just going to give you a moment to unmute or put something in the chat. If there's something that's circling since the last time we met, was morphology and vocabulary, that's either about that session or one of the previous ones, or something that's come up since that's just rattling around in your mind. For example, this morning I had a conversation with a district, and somebody was saying, can you just talk about the difference between balanced literacy and structured literacy? Just the high-end overview. What would be your quick answer on that? And in case you're interested, my quick answer was really the difference between reactive phonics and intentional planned phonics. And I think that's regarding not just phonics, but all of the aspects of the elements that we see here and the elements of the structural literacy overview. If we think about the pieces that we need in order to be a strong reader and writer, I see the difference as being reactive versus proactive and intentional. That's my personal. I'd love to hear if others have a different perspective or something else that has been circling in your mind, or a piece that you've been thinking about since we last met. I hear somebody typing. Would anyone like to share or unmute?
I was just wondering how to change my focus in some of my IEP goals, and that's all.
That reminds me of our Jamboard. Let me jump to that. So tell us more, Jill. What do you mean?
That was me that put that up there last week. Because I always write goals about specific language, maybe grammar issues. But I have an IEP tomorrow morning, and I wrote one that says to identify and label the noun phrase and verb phrase of a sentence. So I'm sort of shifting to kind of getting that into kids, the meaning of, okay, who did what kind of thing. I don't know.
But we haven't even done this.
I've never written a goal that says noun phrase, verb phrase before, but I'm going to try it tomorrow.
Well, that's actually like, we haven't even talked about noun phrases and verb phrases. That's today's work, Jill. But I think that's now regarding the Common Core State Standards, I will add in a tool that I recently found that I think would be very, very helpful. And it looks at the foundational skills across grade levels. It comes from California, but I found it recently and really it's laying out the foundational skills and Common Core State Standard references from early through high school. So you can see kindergarten here. This starts on page 16. This is 16 and 17. And I think that this could help too, especially if you look at what are the prerequisite skills that your kids should know. So I'll put this into the chat box for you, and I'll make sure to leave it up so I can add it into our resource document later on as well. So Jill, there are no easy answers for that. IEP goals examples, I'll have to keep working on that. But you're right. And when you talk about noun phrases and verb phrases, and I think too, I would even go beyond, depending on the kids, go beyond just focusing on nouns and verbs. Well, that's a great place to start. But to identify what kinds of questions phrases answer. And that's something we're going to be focusing on today. So
okay, I was just because I mean it's easy kind of for them to find the nouns and the verbs, but if you include that phrase, then you get the function words that he is not using. This little kid is omitting function words. So anyway, that's what I was gonna try to explain tomorrow.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that function words, because that's something we talked about last week, isn't it? Remember the difference between the content word and the function words. I just saw, unfortunately, it was on Twitter, and then it was referenced to Instagram, but I took pictures because I'm not on Instagram, of an explanation from Sally Shaywitz about why our kids with dyslexia struggle with those function words. Our kids with dyslexia struggle with them because their meaning is less clear than the content words. So if you remember when we had early on that triangle of the best way to know a word is to know its sound, its symbol, and its the sounds, the symbols, and the meaning. Well, if they only have those two of the sounds and the symbols, and the meaning isn't strong, this is going to be a weaker connection. And so it makes it easier for them, or harder for them to remember, and easier for them to struggle with those function words when they're reading them. So fantastic connection, Jill. Thank you. Someone else? Something that's been circling in your mind since last week? Jill brought up the content and function words from last week.
I've been pondering that alphabet piece visually as a school librarian, trying to find my place in all of this and thinking about how I want to help kids visually, tactilely in a sense, connect with like anteater, like which my daughter knew when my children were super little. Before they were born, I started collecting Beanie Babies, and then when they were born early, we found out that Beanie Babies were one of the few things they could have. Anyway, I ended up starting a collection, and what I was thinking is I'd like to maybe look and see, do I have Beanie Babies for each letter of the alphabet, that when we are looking at that sound or whatever, they could hold, like that tactile, like in the story circle around in the library, what could we do? But then they'd also be sitting up on the top shelves, so we could always refer back to them. But it got me to thinking about, even if I could do that, it would take me a while to collect the 26 I'm sure I need. But second, I want to make sure that I get the right animals that have the right sounds so that I don't add confusion. And so it was like maybe gorilla and kangaroo, and which ones do I want to not have? And then the other part of me wanted to go, and could I have them in groups so that there'd be animals that would come from different habitats, so that as I'm doing that kind of a study with maybe third graders, that's just my brain getting stuck on something.
Thinking linguistically too, Deborah, is you could do the gorilla and the giraffe together, and recognizing that those are both spelled with the G,
right?
That the language origin, that giraffe, maybe you put a beret on it, because that French influence making the GE or GI, giraffe, GI, I guess it's GI, making that G sound.
Right.
And even maybe
like
an ant and an aardvark and and recognizing the different sounds,
right?
but grouping those together to develop the flexibility. I mean, I was just
space to say puppets, and so it's just So I know it's not super deep, but it was just ways to help support and build. And
I appreciate that. We got cut off a moment there, but hopefully
we could refer to.
Thank you, Deborah. I appreciate it. I don't think we have anyone new, but I'm going to go ahead and invite and to see if there's anyone new in our group who hasn't been with us before. I did close off that poll, so please put yes, I'm new into the chat box if you are new, but otherwise I'm not going to spend much time on introductions. I do invite you to put your name in the chat or into the Jamboard, or at this point too, take a kind of glance through to see who else is with us. For example, Savannah, I would love if you would mind putting your district on for you. Angela as well. And Matt's iPhone, I don't have my notes in front of me to say. Matt, are you from Mukilteo?
I am from Mukilteo.
All
Sorry.
right. No,
I'm
no
I'm
worries.
driving home, so
I get it. I'll fix it for you. I'll put Matt from
thank
Muckle to
you.
you.
Thank you.
Muckle
Beautiful.
T-O. Is that T? I hope I got that right. All right. So I'll just kind of draw attention to the context on these pictures. The top one is a group of people from Washington who attended the International Dyslexia Association conference in Oregon, in Portland, when that was just before COVID. That was in 2019. And I recognize a few people from Hamlin Robinson, some advocates, and the person who runs the dyslexia Facebook page. So there are some people that I know and that, and people I've been getting to know. And then going clockwise, the next one is me with Era Jackson, who used to be the ELA director before Carrie. She's now with Seattle Public Schools. And we were working together on Washington Reading Corps. And then in the bottom left is my Sunderland mentor, Myrna Soul, and Ladera Horn, who is a poet with dyslexia. So just a little bit of more fun with that. I should have put this earlier, our requests. If there's something I'm missing, please put it into the chat box. But otherwise, let's get into a little bit of fun, a virtual icebreaker before we get into syntax and fluency. So we've just got a small group today, 11 of us. Would you care sharing something that helps you take a deep breath, that helps you calm down, or that maybe it's an escape? For me right now, I escape with Netflix, and my escape right now is The Arrow. I like some fantasy shows. I did The Flash, and so that's one of my escapes. A book, unfortunately, unfortunately, most of my books are all work related. I haven't read a good fiction book in a while, so if somebody has one for my summer that's approaching, I would love to have you to share that. I think the most recent fiction books I read were the Outlander series. I'm looking forward to her 10th book. I don't know if it's out yet.
Have you read the children's book by Kelly Barnhill, The Ogress? No, the Ogress and the Orphans?
No.
It just spoke to me. Maybe because I felt like it really connected the idea of acceptance and non-acceptance, and what is truth, what is not, and the whole idea of I don't know. For a children's book, I wish it had gone farther in the awards, but I loved it. So
Deborah, will you please put the name in the chat box? I look forward to that.
Yeah.
Seeing new things. I love how Rachel, I agree with you, getting outdoors, and then I pay for it afterwards if I'm not too experienced with it. I did a lot of paddle boarding last weekend and I'm still sore. I think I can finally take a deep breath without it hurting. So I overdo it sometimes. Thank the Ogress and the Orphans. I look forward to that, Kelly. I do like a lot of, my kids are teenagers and we do read a lot of young adult books together. And for example, if you haven't read Fablehaven series, those are my favorite. They were Brandon Mull is phenomenal. The Overlander books, Fablehaven was again. Oh, and the other one's Unwanted series. Beautiful books with magic and mystery and relationships, and so those are really fun too. Awesome. Thank you for the tips, everyone. I appreciate it. Opportunities for us to share and learn from each other. Deborah, yeah, unwanted quests too, Deborah. We came up with that. Tons of hiking. Oh, I love being out in the woods. So keep it coming. As we're doing so, I did pull this, I think, yesterday. So I love it when more people do the survey than show up in the class, because then I can say 24 of the 11 of you. I always say I actually can do math, but nonetheless, take a look at this kind of scope or these results from the survey from that you did on syntax. We have quite a variety, as always, somebody all across the board with a bit more of a concentration in the lower middle 3, 4, and 5. So good to keep in mind as we work with each other that we do have heterogeneous groups in this arena. So we're going to start with a syntax warm-up. Before we do, I just want to have a reminder real quickly of those elements of literacy development. Remember that we need to make sure that we think about our students and what they need, because this comes back to earlier when I said, phonics, is it explicit or is it implicit? And the whole point about the phonics is to make sure that our kids can access the code independently. There are many programs and many approaches who focus on meaning first and think that kids will get to the code through meaning. Some of them will, the majority of them will not. As you can see, my daughter was not at that point in time. She does not pay any attention to the code whatsoever. Her book was upside down. So this is just reminding us of that simple view of reading and how we need both of those. And this, as we talk about syntax and grammar, we're going to be talking about comprehension a lot more. But of course, we get to it through our reading and we get to it through our writing. Notice this little line at the bottom too, that this is not static within a student. Remember, we had actually, I don't think I've shown this one yet with the kids. One of the things I want to stress on that is that this could change. So it's like, you can't say this kid has low comprehension about everything, or this kid, maybe word recognition, yes, we can determine that it's strong or not. But really, this is the piece that's going to change a lot over time and grow. So let me give you an example of what I mean by it's a relationship between the passage and the student. So if I have my young kid who is strong at all of them, this is my typical reader, has strong language comprehension, strong word reading, and therefore understands what he reads quite well. But notice his book here, ABC. Let's give him a harder book. That one's XYZ. Or if you give me a book on protein kinases or engineering, he and I still can sound out any of those words. Now, because of my vocabulary background, maybe I'm not pronouncing them correctly. Epitome is a difficult one. When you look at it in print, it looks like epitome. But pretty much sound out everything. The question is, do I understand what I'm reading? And because I don't know the context, I don't have the background knowledge, I don't know the vocabulary. If you're talking to me about engineering a protein kinases, or this young man with his XYZ book, we will have weak reading comprehension as a result. Our kids with dyslexia typically have strong language comprehension that they bring to the table, or are emerging readers very often, but it's the word reading that we need to work on and to develop and build. So initially, we're talking about a weak reading comprehension. How can we support by one, of course, building on this, and in the meantime, giving them some audio supports, reading it to them, or giving them something to listen to develop their strong reading comprehension. Make sense? Another visual, just to have another way of looking at that. Notice too, I think when my folks first made this image, she didn't have a book in her hand. She was just listening. And I said, she needs to have a book. We need to have that visual as well as the auditory together. All right, so let's get into our syntax. We'll start with a warm up here. Can you put in the chat box what those terms are? Now I know Jill knows NP and VP because we were talking about those as you all were coming in. I'll give you a moment to type them in, spell them out. What does the S stand for? The D is a hard one. Don't worry about the D. It's a determiner. But the other ones we should know. Jill smiling, she's like, yep, I can do those. She said, I've got it. Determiner and noun for the beginning. Determiner, noun. S for sentence. I'll give people a moment. Leisha, L, verb for verb, yes. So actually I should count these. I'm going to stamp the ones rather than make it go away. So we've got determiner, noun, verb, sentence. I did determiner and noun. What about the P's? What are those? Rachel's got it. Verb phrase, which would make, in both of them, that would make these noun phrases. So a place for us to start as we're getting going. All right, so when I'm talking about syntax, one of the things I want to draw our attention to is that as our language gets more complex, as kids have to read higher and higher complexity of texts, the ability to interpret that complex or literary syntax becomes more correlated with reading comprehension as kids get older, beginning in those intermediate grades. So that it contributes to your overall proficiency with academic language. So this is an important thing to keep in mind as your kids get older. This gets all the more important. Now, granted, of course, it's important for the younger ones. Let's start setting that framework for them early on. But it becomes all that more important for them to understand what they're reading as they're older. What do we mean when we talk about syntax? We're talking about relationships. So Jill was starting out saying, I want to talk to my kids about, do they know noun phrases and verb phrases? Let's talk about what questions do these phrases answer? So here's our, let me use something with stay. Your noun phrase answers who or what, doesn't it? Your verb phrase, what did it do? What's it doing? Well, tell me about it if it's a linking verb. But then you have our adverbial phrases, our adjectival phrases, and the why, that could be a clause, that could be an adverb or an adjective, depending on how it's being used. So this is the whole place where we're bringing meaning in, is that we're looking at beyond the individual word level. This is how words work together. And that's the whole key piece on wording. Reading individual words isn't going to get you any meaning, is it, folks? If I give you the word can, and you're going to ask me how to pronounce that, I'm going to say can. Oh, but what if I put it in the sentence, I can go to the store? I'm not going to say it naturally, I can go. It becomes can. So how much stress? In that case, it's a function word because it's modifying go. I can go. Versus I have a can of soda. Now it's a content word because it is something that I'm holding in my hand. It's a noun. So notice that polysemy, it has multiple meanings and multiple ways that I use it. So keep that in mind. That's going to be really crucial here, because that's actually what Margie Gillis calls syntactical jobs. She uses these bricks to illustrate that these are the building bricks of sentences. So you must have, and I think her colors were different, but these are the colors, particularly the red and green. I don't care about the other colors, but the red and green ones are important to me because while these might have been initially random, once I had small children and we were doing handwriting apps, there was one creature who said, an app who said, we follow the rules of the road. We start with green and end with red. And so that's exactly our sentence here. Remember, folks, that to have a complete sentence, you need to have a green and a red. Without one of those, you're not going to have a complete sentence. You need the who, a who or what, and what that who or what did. And that's, you need a do or a doing and their action. So I'm going to give you a moment to think about, how would you describe each of these? How would you help your kids find them and what they mean? How would you describe them? Because some of them are easier to describe than others. Remember, we have our content words. Let me circle those here. Our content words are our nouns, our verbs, our adjectives, and our adverbs. And remember, our function words are the glues that hold them together. A little bit harder to define, weren't they? So I'll give you a moment and think about how you would define those. And then I'm going to give you some suggestions and ideas that I have on the next slide. Again, roles or jobs. It's 2:30 in the afternoon on a Thursday. You want me to keep going? Oh, I love location and time and space, Jennifer, for preposition. I like how you've put that. It indicates relationships, doesn't it? They all do, but specifically where and how. Particularly because notice how a prepositional phrase could be adjectival. Oops, where's the adjective over here? Adjectival, or it could be adverbial. Depends on how it's used. If I say the book on the table is telling me about the book. I'm here to come up with this off the top of my head. If I said he went in the house tells me where he went, so it becomes an adverbial. So it's again, what kind of questions do they answer? So these are the some of the answers that I use. So the question is to think about, what are your answers to these? And I have a handout that I will put in the chat box for you in a moment, so you can see a resource that you can take with you that talks about the questions, not the statements so much. And I actually, though, have individual posters with all these that I made and had on my wall, where I would have an example of it. I would say, now what is due? It names a person, place, thing, or idea. I would have some examples of it, as you can see here. And I will also talk about what kind of questions it answers. In this case, for a noun, it answers the who or what. The key piece for nouns is they can be preceded by a determiner, an article, and they can be made plural. So when your kids are trying to figure out if it's a noun or not, especially we have a lot of abstract nouns, can you make it more than one? It's not always something you can hold, like an idea is an idea. Notice that I can precede it with, or I can have multiple ideas, so therefore it's a noun. Literacy How, which is Margie Gillis's, calls nouns the namer, so that kids understand that it names something. And then as they get older, they can think about the fact that it's called a noun. So I'm going to put the resource in the chat box for you, I think. Let me see if that was the right one. And let's add that here. It should be to our drive. No, this was a different one that I found that I liked. Oh, noun, verb, who or what, is or what doing. So that's a poster that I found. I'll take us to our resources to show you the handout. And we're going to go to our tinyurl.com Dyslexia 101 handouts. And we're going to go to the Franken handouts resources from a presentation I did at IDA with Kate Franken. And are these not in alphabetical order? Are they? Here it is, Franken handouts. I think it's page 3 that are these grammar questions. I do have it separated out too, but if you go to that grammar, here we go, grammar questions. So the articles say, where's the noun? A noun's coming. Adjectives, which one, what kind, how many. Nouns, who or what. You see the idea. It's answer questions. That's the most important thing that we want to think about, is what questions do they answer? So a piece of that for you. Tip, if you make your posters, the yellow's hard to read on white. I like to do black on yellow for conjunctions. It's easier to read, but that's just, however you're going to, notice how I did the same here as I'm black on yellow. All right, so let's talk about, though, jobs or roles instead of labels. As I said earlier when I talked about polysemy and the word can, is that many words, especially our high frequency words, can be used in multiple ways. So I'm going to give you a moment to pick one of these 4 words and use a sentence, put it in a sentence in the chat box, and then keep building upon them. So if somebody uses rock or any one of these as a noun, can somebody else use it as a verb? Could someone else use it as an adjective? Because all of these 3 could play those different roles, like we did with can. So I'll stop talking for a moment and see what kinds of sentences come in. Jennifer's got a great one. You rock. That's definitely a verb, isn't it? Or I can rock back and forth, as I think. I have a rock. Jill's giving me all of them. And what was the other one there? I like rock music. There we go. Nina's a sock in the eye, a sock, but not with these squiffly snocks. So she's got 2 nouns there. I spotted ladybug. I like to pick up rocks. We have a few coming in. Well, I'll give you some more examples here. Rock the boat. My son collects rocks. He prefers rock music. I think I saw somebody put something in a rock concert, maybe. A ski jump, a jump shot. I saw somebody using spot as a noun and a verb. Have you spotted Spot, the dog with a spot? Two nouns in that one, Deborah, with green. I spot a ladybug that's spotted. So we've got both a verb and an adjective in there. And I think someone used sock that is nouns with a sock in the eye, unless you've said, he socked me hard. Whoops, I got it right there. I was trying to use sock as a verb in the first one. Is it only a verb in the past tense? That's again comes into use. That's a good question, Nina. I think about if you don't do as I say, I'm gonna sock ya. So it could be future. I think it's an older fashioned term. We don't think you won't hear it to use it to be hit. It's not okay to sock him in the face. So I think that it's not a term we don't use that much, but I was trying to find something that worked in all three cases like those. So it's, I'm sure you could come up with better examples than I have. In fact, I'm going to let you take a moment to think about these and talk to each other about that. I'm going to pause the recording where I give you a moment to talk to each other about these roles of words rather than thinking about parts of speech. So we had 3 small rooms. And at this point, I want to open up for representatives from any of those rooms to share out. I know that we often have Deborah and Jill and perhaps Leisha and Jennifer. We have some of our sharers today. If you are comfortable sharing, I don't want to say you can.
I can share for our group. Just because I feel like I don't like share a lot. So we kind of Deborah and I kind of talked about, I don't know if I think we answered the question, how take a moment to think about roles of words rather than words as parts of speech. So we kind of thought about like the function of words and kind of how it evolves. Language kind of evolves and changes over time. So we talked a little bit about like onomatopoeias and how that function would really be like especially like in creative writing to like get you into like to make you feel like you're having almost like more senses into that experience. And then we talked about like how language is always changing and slang and how slang can become canon. And then we talked about like words helping to paint the picture. So like the old like creative writing example of like show don't tell. So like instead of saying like Bob was tall, you could say like Bob hit his head on the way out the door, and then you would have a visual. So we talked a lot about like kind of using like words to use other like senses other than hearing. So like seeing or smelling and then that was and then we just kind of talked a little bit about the difference of like technical writing versus creative and how there's so many like different ways to write based on the type of words you want to use.
But I'm hearing a connection with writing, but also as we build those writing skills, we build reading. And as I'm hearing you going beyond the word level, when you substituting instead of tall, he hit his head on the way out. You're going beyond just one single word and you're expanding kids' knowledge and abilities. So thank you on that, Jennifer. How about another group? Hi, Matt. Welcome back.
Hey. Well, my group kind of, I was driving a little bit, but I just kind of added like that I was a Spanish major in undergrad. So I've thought about words as parts of speech, but also I have to think about the function of them and what they're actually telling me. Which was it Jennifer who just said, who was talking about how it like really connects with writing as well, because when you're writing, there's so many different ways you can say something, and in such a different variety of ways. So I just thought it was kind of cool that I can now look at my own first native language and be able to do the same thing I've done in my second language.
Well, and Matt, I was thinking about the fact that as a math teacher, aren't kids having to write more and more explaining their thinking?
1000%. And that's funny that you say that. I was actually just talking to a colleague before I left today that I was saying, I think we need to, for like test corrections, they need to be able to show it mathematically, but also they need to explain it with words, because that's a lot of the times where students get caught up with math is they're like, okay, like I hate story problems. And a lot of that just comes down to what words mean what math symbols. So it's kind of mentioned.
Yes, and it's translating that, and remember that the phrase that I've used in the past, verbalize to internalize. And so whether that verbalization is your first step, and if you can write it down, that takes you, I'm going to say add on to writing, that solidifies it even more in your memory through that act of writing.
Exactly, because it puts it back into the form that they're most comfortable with.
So I think I'm going to change this, verbalize to internalize, write to remember. Thank you for that, Matt. Is there anybody else who'd like to add on? We've heard from 2 different groups. We don't have to hear from all 3. It's an invitation. All right, I'll clear all that off. And we're going to jump in. Remember, I was saying to write to remember. One way to be starting with this and helping our kids get the concept of a complete sentence and how we can then build upon that is something we can do. And this is an activity from Margie Gillis, again, from Literacy How. And we're going to practice it so you can see what it feels like. I know we don't have a lot of time, but we have enough time for a 2-minute exercise here. So I do need everyone to have a piece of paper. I can see Jennifer's got one, something to write on and something to write with. And I'm going to get out my phone as a timer because we're going to do 2 30-second brainstorms. So you're going to make 2 columns on your piece of paper. One column, it will be animals. The next column will be things animals do. So we're going to take 30 seconds for each. And then afterwards, down underneath, you're going to write little tiny sentences. Something, picking an animal and something that animal does, or any, it could be something that animals don't do but could do. Or for example, if you said pigs fly, wouldn't that be, it could be imaginative. All right, so while you're getting materials, I'm going to find my timer, put it on to 30 seconds, 0 minutes, clear that. All right, so hopefully everyone has your materials at this point. First column, animals, as many as you can think of in 30 seconds, go. Physical warm-up. And 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to stop that. And next column, things animals can do. Ready? Go. Nine, 8, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wrap up that animal or action. And I'm going to change this to 45 seconds. You're going to take an animal from column 1 and an action from column 2. Ready? Go. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's stop. Okay. So how do we do? How many sentences? How'd that feel? Just kind of give you a moment with that. You've got lots of sentences, right? At least I would bet that everyone has at least 5 sentences. No, not more. So that's a place to start to help your kids recognize a complete sentence with a doer and what that doer does. So now we can help them recognize and think about expanding them. So in this case, we are scaffolding the expansion of language at the sentence level through sentence expansion. So we have a namer and we have actions. We have that nouns and verbs. We have namers and actions. So in this case, I chose dogs heard, or I added an article and I put my dog, or not an article, a possessive pronoun. My dog herds. So Now I'm going to ask some questions for them to expand that. Angela, you got 5 sentences. You're awesome. You got 5 sentences. So let's take one of those little mini sentences and think about questions to expand that name or a noun. What kind of dog? How many dogs? Which dog? So I might then expand that out to, click here. My shaggy dog with the brown and white coat, Herds. So Jilla, we were talking about adjectival phrases here. With the brown and white coat, prepositional phrase that's telling me about the dog. Shaggy is telling me about the dog. Both of these I put in orange because they're telling me about the dog. All right, that thing hurts. Now I'm going to ask questions to expand the action of the verb. Our adverbial phrases. In this case, my shaggy dog with the brown and white coat Herds. Where? Inside the fence. How? With a back and forth motion. When? Every afternoon. So you get the idea of how we can be expanding this and paying attention to them and helping our individual, and rather than doing this together, I'll do it quickly because we want to get to the meat of things, but helping us remember that that sentence has to have a subject and a predicate. And that which what we're talking about is a noun or noun phrase and a verb or verb phrase, regardless of how much. So going back to that example we had a moment ago, was this one? What's way too many? Here we go. Putting it back here. That whether it was a simple, my dog, let me put here, my dog as my noun, tiny noun phrase, Herds as a tiny verb phrase, because a phrase can be one or more words, or my shaggy dog with the brown and white coat as a much bigger noun phrase, and Herds inside the fence with black, white, back and forth motion every afternoon as a much bigger verb phrase. I should have made those blue, green, and red, but you get the idea. Anyway, that takes too long. So we need to have the green and the red in order to have a complete sentence. Then when we start talking about clauses, I should have done phrases. I should have done these in opposite order. A clause, though, can be independent or dependent. So a sentence is a clause, but a clause isn't always a sentence. We'll start there. So clauses have, and when I say independent or dependent, a clause is a combination of a subject and a verb. So these are combinations of subjects and verbs, as are these. And I'm going to show you some examples. The difference is some of them can stand alone. And that's what we call, why I say a sentence is a clause. But a clause isn't necessarily a sentence. Remember how we say to kids, don't start a sentence with because? That's because it's a dependent clause. It cannot stand alone. I'm going to give you some more examples of those in just a moment. One thing I do want to point out from my colleague, unfortunately not mine, but a great former professional development provider who likes to use these serifs. And notice how I'm not using those for anything else. But for when I'm talking about independent clause versus dependent clause, because notice the frame on which that I is sitting, it's not going to tip over. It can stand alone. But that D is top heavy and it needs to have an independent clause either before it or after it, holding it up. Otherwise, it's going to fall over and it cannot stand all alone. So hence the advantage of using the little serifs for that. And then lastly, we talked about verb. The phrases can be either nouns, verbs, adjectives, or adverbs. We've talked about those a lot. So when we're talking about the dependent clauses, though, I am going to give us some examples here. These are what we mean by, these are words that will start our dependent clauses. So remember I said because is one. Since I have been teaching, I have been getting up early. So notice, since I have been teaching, can't stand alone. Until he comes home, can't stand alone. While I was sitting next to my mother, in order that I get my job done correctly, none of these can stand alone. They're all subordinating clauses or dependent clauses. They can't stand alone. I need to put the serifs on this one. There's a great example from William Van Cleve. I'm going to, from one of his videos, I'll put share with you the video in the chat box. But can I get a volunteer to read these for us? And I want us to think about the difference how just that one subordinating conjunction, that one introduction, all of these start with a subordinating clause, a dependent clause, and then we have the main kernel sentence. But notice that subordinating conjunction in orange and how it changes the meaning drastically of those sentences. So can I get a volunteer to read those for us? Thanks, Jennifer.
Sorry, do you want me to read them, like all of them?
Yes, please, but you
Okay,
don't
great,
have to
sure.
just think about it.
Well, while I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house. After I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house. Before I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house. Because I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house. Although I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house. Whenever I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house.
Which ones would give you a headache the most, Jennifer?
Sorry, a headache. I don't know if they give me a headache, but I definitely see where it changes the meaning. Like,
I meant
because
if you were trying to study
oh,
and if you were the I in this, would you be bothered so much if she ran screaming through the house before or after, as much as whenever or while? What are your I see Jill nodding. What are your thoughts on those, Jennifer?
I guess I was like thinking of myself more as like how the action was affecting the sister, because I was like, oh, I guess I shouldn't study because every time I do it, my sister is going to run screaming through the house. Or like the although, I guess I took the wrong or a different perspective, but the like although, like, which would mean like usually this is like a calming thing for my sister, but in this case, I don't know, it's not, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really key piece on these interpretations. I mean, before and after those are easy, but because and although, I mean, we're going to look at that because, and again, this could be complicated for some of our kids when they look at causality. They see that I studied is coming first, though, so they think it is primary. But that is, so when you look at that one, that's a great example here. This because I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house. Some of our kids might struggle with which came first, me studying or my sister screaming from their house. Same thing, so the time gets complicated as meaning gets complicated. And look, all we did was change one word and it changed the meaning of those sentences drastically, didn't it?
It feels like because those phrases are in the beginning, because your sentence doesn't start, my sister ran screaming through the house, blah, blah, blah. By flipping that, it really does make that causal word have so much more importance.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, Deborah. If I said, my sister ran screaming through the house while I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house after I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house before I studied, that would be a lot easier for our kids, wouldn't it? For understanding. But we don't always do that. This is where, again, a little more complex syntax, isn't it? This is why on that last slide, notice these are the two different ways of combining two different and independent and dependent. This is what you saw examples of. Because I ran screaming through the house or whatever, because I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house, versus my sister ran screaming through the house because I studied. And it does influence my perception of the importance versus my perception of meaning, which one I choose to put first. And so there's another place for conversation with your students as to which one, where is the stress? I have one more thing on dependent clauses, and that is when they are adjectival. So these are those that serve as adjectives. And instead of starting with a subordinating conjunction, these start with relative conjunctions. So the who, whom, which, or that. So notice we've got, we don't usually like whom in our language anymore. We'll either skip it or we'll change it to who. So we'll say the girls he likes follow him. And that's become accepted usage now. Versus the girls whom he likes, because he likes those girls, they follow him. The boy who likes to read. So notice we have a clause here though, because we have a subject and a verb. The boy comes here daily. There's my kernel sentence. Which boy? the boy who likes to read. So the boy who likes to read. So notice how that's an adjective. Here again, the girls follow him. Which girls? The girls whom he likes. So that's telling me about those girls. Now we use who and whom with people and which or that with things, or at least if we are using prescriptive grammar versus descriptive. I say that because I hear the word that being used for people all the time. Language changes. It does make me cringe. I'm kind of old-fashioned. For me, if you say the children that I cringe and say they're children. Let's say use who or whom. But again, it's a way to get away from using whom. We use that. Notice the difference too is when we have a non-essential phrase or clause. Again, subject, verb. It's non-essential to the subject, so I'm going to put it off with commas, and I use which, versus an essential phrase is not set off aside by commas, and I'm using that instead. Review, I'm sure, for all of you, but something to think about when we think about what our kids need. Okay. Next, we're going to move into, though, how to find these phrases and identify them and support our kids with them. I was going to give a break, but it's after 3, so let's jump into this instead. So this next step on pulling it out of and identifying those phrases and clauses is a step in the Slingerland lesson plan that we call preparing to read. I could just call it phrase reading. I could call it phrase identification. But these are phrases that I'm pulling from texts that my students will be reading. And I'm pulling phrases that maybe have words my kids would struggle with to read if they came to the word by themselves. I'm pulling phrases that might support their understanding of grammatical concepts. I'm pulling phrases, or in some cases, clauses. I see a clause in the second one, don't you? Because they gave me pain. There was a dependent clause we were just talking about. So I'm helping my kids understand language and how it's used. In this case, too, look at the third one. I've pulled a phrase that is in italics because it's the title of something. So I'm going to talk about why is that in italics. So I'm going to model the steps to learning this and how we do this. There are actually 4 steps, but I'm going to, and I'm model it, and then I'll show you what those steps are, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to practice as well. Actually, I'll show you the steps, then I'll model it for you. So I will need a volunteer for, number 1, I'll just talk about. But number 2, I'm going to actually ask for a volunteer to be my individual student. We have most people muted, so you don't have to worry about the class rereading them. And number 3, and then we can just talk about number 4. So I really can just need 2 volunteers on this. So to first clarify, though, what I'm going to be doing is reading the phrases, and we'll talk about what they mean. And if you were my class, you would reread those. Notice the word reread. This is really crucial here. It's not class repeats, because we need to make sure that they are connecting the symbols and the sounds as they're rereading. So then we're going to have a volunteer. A student is going to come up to the board. In this case, it's going to be the virtual space. And I'm going to read a phrase, and the student will find the phrase, read it. And if that student has found the correct phrase and read it correctly, the class will reread it. This is a way you can get your class engaged. It's because, say, Nina is the one who's doing this work, and she misreads something, and everybody repeats it except for Jill. And I say, Jill, I noticed that you didn't repeat what Nina says. You did not reread it. And Jill would say, because she missed this word. Great catch, Jill. Nina, let's try that again. And so it's bringing that class paying attention to it instead of having the kids robotically. That's bringing your engagement as well. So then the third one, I'm going to provide a clue instead of reading it. And then lastly, I will prompt students to read perhaps maybe every other one starting from the top, or every other one from the bottom. Or we're going to show a video in a bit where you'll get to see her prompt more cues or prompts for the kids to think about and building their auditory memory or their phonological memory in the process. All right, so let me view this one first. And when I'm preparing for these ones for my students, I'm going to read, and let me get my little pointer here, my spotlight. 4,000 years. This is a prepositional phrase. It has to do with time. And thousand might be one of our weird words here because look at that S making a Z sound in thousand. But remember that S can play a S or a Z. So it's one of our flex sound letters. So I'm looking at 4,000 years. And this is a noun phrase. Notice because of the A tells me 1,000 years. That's a thing. But I have a preposition first. So 4,000 years, that's probably telling me when something happened. That's giving me a context about a story or how long something took place. Because they gave me pain, this is a clause. Notice, remember, we have a subject here and we have a verb. So this is a clause, not a phrase. Also because it starts with that subordinating conjunction. So this tells me why something happened or was happening. This next one, the acts of King Arthur and his noble knights. Notice how this has no verb. So this is obviously a phrase because it's a noun phrase. Notice it's starting with the. And when we have these strange, remember we call this italics because it's the name of a story or a book. Written or printed, we always think of writing and printing as actions. But in this case, because of the suffix en and the suffix ed, these are being used as adjectives to tell me about something. The stories have been written or printed. They're written stories, they're printed stories. So these are actually an adjectival phrase, tell me about something. The single greatest effort, there's a noun phrase, isn't it? We've got starting with a the, that's our cue. And I'm telling me about something. What is that thing? That's an effort. And look how we have this superlative, est. That's telling me that it's the most of something. In this case, the greatest single effort. It's more, it took a lot on this. And then lastly, we have our prepositional phrase as a child, which tells me when. All right, so may I have a volunteer to start to model off our first step, second step, really. I just did the first, where I will be reading a phrase and you will find the phrase and read it for the group.
For 1,000 years.
I have to read it for you first, Deborah.
Oh, but one thing with that phrase,
Uh-huh.
almost every time you read it, I heard for 1,000 years. But one time you said it so quickly, it sounded more like the number 4,000 years.
Oh, that's a really important point. Again, bringing back to our conversation that we say all the time, that imperfect relationship between speech and print. So I will say it clearly. Thank you. Are you volunteering, Deborah?
Sure.
Okay. Can you use either a spotlight or an arrow to indicate where you are finding the phrase for the rest of the group?
If I can find the spotlight or the...
They're under annotate. Or you could use a stamp to just stamp it. When you find it, we'll go through that.
Okay, found the annotate. And... Oh, that didn't work. Let me try something else.
Did you find the annotate options? There you go. Yes, you did. Okay. So we've talked about that one. We'll ignore that one. Deborah, your next phrase, the greatest single effort.
The greatest single effort.
The acts of King Arthur and his noble knights.
The acts of King Arthur and his noble knights.
As a child.
As a child.
Because they gave me pain.
Because they gave me pain.
Can you read it again? Pulling as one unit. Because they gave me pain.
Because they gave me pain.
Excellent. So notice how I'm trying to get her to read it as the one unit instead of word by word. Written or printed?
Written or printed.
Excellent. All right, thank you. May I have another volunteer? Nina, you got your hand up? Nina's saying, no, thank you. Jill, may I have you?
Sure.
Jill, I'd like you to find the phrase that it tells me what the story is about. Could be the title of the book.
Am I looking for my stamp?
If you want, or any, there you go.
Did I do it?
You got a dot.
Oh,
So I actually have a stick that I would use as my kids. Where's my stick? Over here. You can use oh, here it is. You can use a yardstick. or
I found a check mark.
So here we go. You can put you're underlining it with a yardstick of somewhat, and go ahead and read your phrase.
The acts of King Arthur and his noble knights.
Find me the phrase that says what it took to do the work or to get it done.
Written or printed? I don't know. Is that what you're asking?
Deborah's not repeating on that one. This one, it's a what phrase?
The greatest single effort?
Yes, everyone's repeating on that one. The greatest, that's what it took to do the work. Find the phrase that tells me how long it stood.
For 1,000 years?
Excellent. Yes, it stood for 1,000 years, or it's a period of time. Or I could say find a prepositional phrase. But now there is another when phrase that's a preposition. Can you find that one for us? Maybe
Another when?
When I
like-
was afraid, perhaps?
When? Where does it say that? When I was afraid?
Find a phrase that would answer the question, when was I afraid?
Because they gave me cane? That's why. As a
When-
child?
There you go. Exactly. So these are answering questions. You found a phrase that answered the question why. Can you repeat that one for us?
Because they gave me pain.
Can you find the phrase that tells me about the books?
What do you mean about them?
It describes them. There you go.
You're talking about written and printed, but I don't know. That's kind of a weird.
It's a hard one. It's a hard one to come up with a prompt for, written or printed.
Right. It would be almost like a how. How did the books become or whatever, how were they created or whatever?
And with some of my older kids, I might say, find me the adjectival phrase. So with some of my older kids,
How.
notice these clues are going to be very different depending on my kids. I might say, tell me the phrase that tells me where the book might be, or in which case we don't have a good where one here, do we? We don't have a where one here at all. That's not a good one. But so I might say my phrases might have nothing to do with this. I'm just trying to clue them to find it. And if I don't do a good job on my clue, I can keep trying. So when you're struggling with written and printed, I can say, all right, find me the phrase that has two words that I think are verbs, but in this case, they're being used as adjectives. Or two words that have suffixes that we've learned, en or ed. So all I'm trying to do is to get them to clue them, but we're going to talk about them and learn about them in that process. So let's do one together before, let me show you a video first, then we'll do it together. Keep jumping around. Okay, so these are those steps that we went through. This is a practice. Actually, let's talk about these together first, and then we'll see her do it in action. And let's again do this everyone is think of you can choose a phrase and think of a question or a prompt that you can, just like I was trying to do with Jill, to get someone to name and read that phrase. So we find the phrase that tells me, in this case, we do have a where. We do have a when. A couple of where. We have a did what. So I'll be the student, and I'll give you a moment to try to give me a prompt, and I will find and read your phrase. You can either put it in the chat box or unmute and try. Okay, Jennifer's saying, find the phrase that is a prepositional phrase. Oh, Jill, I have a lot. I mean, Jennifer, who was that? Jennifer. So let me get my thing here. If I choose this one, and that's not the one you were thinking of, can you get more specific? Was that Jennifer?
Oh, sorry. So, were you saying that is a prepositional phrase, but it wasn't probably the one I was thinking of?
It may or may not have been, but this is a prepositional phrase. This is a prepositional phrase. This is a prepositional phrase.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a prepositional phrase. So if you say find the prepositional phrase, as a student, I might be stumped here. But you can say find the prepositional phrase that tells us where.
Or when. Okay, I get it. Yeah.
So this could be a where in West Orange, New Jersey. To the Legion of Honor could be a where as well. To how I would differentiate these, I might say, find me the phrase that tells me where, and this one has a comma in it, the specific place, to help your kids narrow down into that one. So Rachel, find the phrase that tells how many. I might do, if of millions of people, is that the one you were thinking? All right. Find the phrase that tells me who did what. Find the phrase that tells me, this one could be the end of a sentence, couldn't it? Because there's a period. This one also tells me years and period of time. This one tells me about someone. The linking verbs are harder to clue than action verbs. This one's an interesting, it starts with a number, it starts with a pronoun, but then it has a prepositional phrase. One means someone, because I'm talking about inventors. All right, I see that some wheels are going. People don't want to give it a try on your own. That's fine. We will give you a chance to practice after watching a video, and we're going to show a video. You can see this in action. I think I'm going to do some skipping around, and then we'll give you a chance to talk about it and try it. So I'm going to put the video link into the chat box for you, for those of you in case there are any issues with sound or other things. And I'm also going to pause the recording. So let me put that into the chat. This is actually at a middle school for kids with dyslexia. So let me pause the recording. Resuming recording. Let's, small but mighty. Thank you, Rachel. Yes, definitely. It's our dedicated people. So let's first talk about this. We can talk about this one, or we can talk about the video that we saw. Since I'm here, why don't we start here? How did that feel? Both groups struggled with things like above the racket was one that was difficult, like where or how, like how he spoke, or where it would be depending on your definition of racket. Without meaning to, how did he did it accidentally? He did it without, how did he do it? He did it accidentally. How did he do it? He did it without meaning to. The same thing with good luck would be by good luck. It was by chance that it happened. How did it happen? It happened by good luck. But there are some difficult and challenging ones here. Any other processing from the other groups? So, because I think I was with group one when they talked about this one a little bit more. Any thoughts or processes on this one? We see how knowing what the question list answers could help your kids understand what it means in a sentence and how it builds to a sentence. All right, quiet.
It seems a little tougher almost to have it already written for you and then figure out what question, as opposed to if you said, okay, give me a phrase that tells me when, then they could come up with it. It seems like might be, I don't know, an easier for them. And so this is tougher, it seems like to me. I don't know, maybe not.
No, you're right, it is. But it's important to go both ways, both the expressive and the receptive, so that when they see this in text, they're going to be able to, like you saw in the video, when he's seeing what the one in the same way. What a great example of in normally tells you where, but in the same way is telling me how something's happening.
It's a good example of, in a sense, using these phrases that maybe aren't common in their language. I think of trying to dig deep into Shakespeare. And so if we think of this, approach this kind of like, well, we're teaching Shakespeare, even though we're not, but the idea that these, like, by the skin of his teeth, if they don't know what the words together in the phrase don't have the same meaning as what the phrase means.
Yeah.
Right. So, or even fiery gestures, even if they could figure out the word fiery,
right.
Well, what is fiery gestures? So the visualization there of what when you look just at the words, don't give them the meaning of the phrase.
Yes, what a great exploration of not idioms, but figurative language, which we'll be
Yes.
talking about a bit more next week as well.
And that's really tough for learners when English is not their first language.
And many of our kids with learning disabilities as well,
Yes.
including dyslexia, or especially autism can be very black and white thinking. And so these are some of the things that we might have to help them dig deeper and understand that no, teeth don't have skin. And that phrase, by the skin of his teeth, means just barely, like he escaped by the skin of his teeth.
Or even above the racket. Are you talking about a tennis racket? Are you talking about a noise level? What is racket? Or even lamppost? I think of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and C.S. Lewis, but most other stories don't really talk about a lamppost. So
Right.
what is a lamppost? Where would I find a lamppost? You know,
In my backyard.
right.
But most of the time we call it a street light now.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
Using definitely some vocabulary here as well. Well, since I'm on this one, did anyone have a chance to talk about these? I heard group 1 talking about what kinds of phrases. Did group 2 talk about these at all? And are there any things that we want to draw attention to a whole group on this one?
I love how young kids can learn to say Tyrannosaurus Rex and read Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's probably more of a sight word in a sense, just because it's such a big word, but they love the dinosaur. And clapping out the parts, it's pretty amazing. They feel really big when they can read Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yes, and so remember, Deborah, that every word aspires to be a sight word when it grows up. So in this case, I can help my kids ran, see the ran in there, no, soar, and then us, helping them break it up. Tyrannosaurus, Tyrannosaurus. That ran is getting that big emphasis, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, for somebody like my daughter, even I'm not wonder how old, would still need that broken apart because she may stumble on some of the syllables otherwise. So it helps to break it apart. Tyrannosaurus. Make sure that they pronounce it correctly. Mm-hmm. But again,
tapping out those parts.
Mm-hmm. And I'm probably going to do that as I'm introducing these phrases for them. Tyrannosaurus Rex, you know that's one of your favorite dinosaurs, isn't it? So when you see this, we're going to be reading it as Tyrannosaurus Rex. Tyrannosaurus Rex. Let's do that together. So we're emphasizing, remember, we're accenting too. Tyrannosaurus Rex. Feel the rhythm and the cadence with that. Mm-hmm. With dagger-like teeth. Where in another direction? What that biggest meat eater? And look at this compound word, a meat eater, someone who eats meat. And we have that suffix er that tells me someone who does eat meat. And remember, here's another suffix est. Remember that, that double G? Because your base word big doesn't have a double G, does it? So a lot of opportunities to talk about language in here. Group 2, did you have any conversation about this one as well?
I think the trickiest ones are the how.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. How did he do it with dagger-like teeth? Where? The nouns are easier, but because we have, here's a when, here's another noun phrase, and another noun phrase. This one, because we have lots of noun phrases, you're not gonna be able to just say, tell me the phrase that tells who or what, because there are lots of them. So you're gonna have to use some other tools. Their best chance, I might say, tell that what did he give them? Or a phrase that has a pronoun, a possessive pronoun, depending on what I've taught my kids. Or the phrase that has the that has that tricky C in it, and chance, that CE making us instead of K.
It seems like you'd want to almost do a phrase sort and put all of the who in a column and divide it out and then play around with that, making different, especially if we're doing reading and writing at the same time kind of thing. Who, like their best chance at that time, you know, kind of thing.
And that is something that if you have the time to do, if this is something I'm going to do previous to reading, which is, so today we saw that illustration in the video of, let me pull that back up. Here we go. Of her using these, and she's just, it's a quick exercise. She's going through and having them practice these all. And next, which we'll see next week, she's going to have them read it from the text that has these phrases. So yes, and there are different things that you could be doing with these.
Now, in that video, those phrases don't make up a sentence, right? They're just in the story.
Yes. They're from different places in the story.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was processing it correctly.
Yeah, we'll watch her going through what's called structured reading, where she is supporting students in their reading in the story by prompting them to read individual phrases first and then putting them together to read whole words. But these are the practice that she's doing ahead of time to prepare for that reading. Did you either group, I know I talked with one group a little bit about the video, but did others have a chance to talk? Did the other group talk about your perceptions, your thoughts, what you saw in this? I know it was hard to hear. I was trying to give you as much oral support as possible with that. Sorry. Sorry, I have an aging dog behind me.
We just wondered why that last task that she gave that boy was find 2, 3, and 7. Because that didn't really have anything to do with the phrase itself, other than where it was located on her chart. I didn't know what was the purpose of that.
So at that 4th stage, you're trying to get them additional practice. So you don't need to be cute. So I'll go back to the prompts and the different ones. So those stages, those steps. Here we go, steps 1. So the whole point though is getting them lots of practice reading them. So in the first one, we're just talking about them and you're rereading. The second one, I'm reading it and you're rereading it. The third one is I'm providing you some kind of meaning behind it and you're rereading it. The fourth one, I was taught read every other one from the top or read every other one from the bottom. But what I like that she's doing is she knows, and this is one thing I pointed out to the other group, she knows that this kid needs to work on his phonological memory, which is what she's doing when she said, read the 2nd, the 4th, and the 7th. And notice she had him repeat it back to again remember those directions. So I can tell from the context that he's needing to work on building how long of directions he can remember. Now, she might not need to do that for every kid. Maybe if I had Deborah come up, Deborah could read every other one from the top. She doesn't need to work on her phonological memory, but I could tell from that situation that he did. So that's why she was having him do that. All right, so fantastic reflection today. I'm just going to ask you to take a moment to put a keyword, a phrase, an important idea, or food for thought, either in the chat box or on the Jamboard. I do have a place on the Jamboard. I think it's the next one for reflections. And I do have one last fun on syntax that I found online. English, the word only anywhere in the sentence. Only she told him that she loved him. She only told him that she loved him. She told only him that she loved him. She told him only that she loved him. She told him that only she loved him. Notice very difference. She told him that she only loved him. She told him that she loved only him. She told him that she loved him only. That adverb can go anywhere, and it really changes meaning, doesn't it? And I had another fun one that I found was minute and minute, content, content, object. I object to that object. I need to read what I read again. Excuse me, but there's no excuse for this. Someone should wind up this post and now throw it in the wind. Our language is complex, isn't it? And that's, I think, one of the things I really appreciate in trying to embrace the complexity, but that complexity is also a beauty. And that's where we can do so much with our language. So, and we have we had a Shakespearean earlier, a Chaucerian, and gladly would he learn and gladly teach. So I look forward to seeing everyone next week. Hope you have a great afternoon. I like it, Rachel, both world and word. Yes. Have a great afternoon, and I'll look forward to seeing everyone next week.